Greetings. The topic for today is how accelerating diffusion of consumer technology has a lot of implications that not just confirm the accelerating rate of both technological and economic change, but reveals a lot of patterns that can be very useful to you in a practical sense. More specifically, if you are an investor or an employee in technology companies, this will enable you to gather the information necessary to increase your probability of a large financial outcome because you will have the information necessary to position yourself somewhat better. So we go to chapter 3 of my Atom publication titled Technological Disruption is Pervasive and Deepening. And I scroll down to a chart, this one. And by clicking on it, what this chart indicates is how consumer technologies have diffused from 0 to some percentage of the consumer base having adopted it in progressively shorter periods of time. And even then, this chart is limited on 2 levels. One, this is a US-only chart. There is not a worldwide chart because nobody makes worldwide charts, especially going back all the way to 1860. And number 2, it still only accounts for tangible hardware products rather than software, when in fact software has a higher diffusibility. And one element of why consumer technology products are diffusing faster and faster to a critical mass of consumer adoption is because the larger and larger proportion of software that these products comprise of. So if you look at a few traits in this chart, you see things like electricity, running water, vacuum cleaners, and so forth had a certain rate of diffusion. And closer to the present, things like the computer, ebook reader, so forth, all have much faster diffusion. There's also a subplot in this trend about how the landline telephone had rapid diffusion, but also went away because it was replaced by the cell phone. So within this chart, we see corroboration of not just accelerating technological progress, but accelerating economic progress, which is inseparable from that. And I speak about that in this video up here, which is a very crucial video for everyone to watch. Now, with this information, you can evaluate whether a technology company has the necessary characteristics that could enable very rapid diffusion. And this is why you see pricing of certain technology companies being very, very high relative to a multiple of future earnings or even a multiple of future revenue. Because if the product is even somewhat good, the diffusion to the first 10 million, 20 million, 30 million consumers is extremely fast. And that was not the case many decades ago. And that's why you see this phenomenon of unicorn tech companies going from 0 to some high valuation in a surprisingly short amount of calendar time. It is all about the probability anticipation of the success of the product that that company is selling. Take, for example, those AR/VR goggles that were in the midst of a hype craze a few years ago. Had any of those products been successful, they would have diffused to the first 20% of households almost immediately, simply because of the demand for that type of product to work. Now, none of those products did very well because they had fundamental technological limitations. I happen to be involved in a company that has potentially fixed the limitation that has enabled all those other eyewear companies that produce AR/VR goggles to fail, and how well we do remains to be seen. But any viable AR/VR headset, or specifically some AR/VR eyewear that isn't even very heavy, will very easily diffuse to tens of millions of people in a very short time, and we all know that to be true if the quality of the product cracks a certain threshold. Now, if you're early in your career, then from a career perspective, if you would like to be able to have greater precision in identifying what types of companies you should focus on and how to find the truly high growth opportunities, high growth startup companies in which to be involved, this can provide other dimensions of thought to help you narrow down the list and increase your probability of getting into the right company at an early stage. There's always some element of luck involved, of course, but this can increase your probabilities over here. It can also help you decide which industries to focus on and which industries to get involved in early, because you will make contacts through your work in those industries. They're also going to perhaps be in a company that becomes the next big success. So even if you don't make it early on, you will at least maybe know people who did, and that will give you a second and a third chance to do so, because there are always going to be a faster and faster curve of adoption, and therefore you will have multiple chances because of the speed of diffusion that we see here. Another thing that this chart sort of corroborates and provides evidence of is how when diffusion gets faster and faster and faster, the accelerating rate of change inherently visible here, despite the fact that all these different products have nothing to do with each other, they are worked on by different people at different companies and at different times in history, the accelerating rate of change is evident here, and the pattern is quite clearly going in a direction where adoption will get closer and closer to instantaneous. And that leads us towards something called a technological singularity, which I talk about in this video up here. And based on how vertical the lines are getting, we get some indication of when that type of technological singularity could occur. Of course, for that, you have to look at a worldwide chart as well. But as I said before, a worldwide chart will show diffusion faster than this US chart shows. So this is definitely some food for thought and a chart to look at very closely, and others like it, because once you see the increasing rate of technological diffusion, a lot of speculation about the accelerating rate of change, why tech companies make so much money, and whether there will be a technological singularity or not sort of goes away, because this is a lot of independent, unrelated data that cannot be rigged by some central authority. So definitely something to keep checking back on. Now, if you like this type of content and you found it informative, then I encourage you to subscribe to this channel, and thank you very much for watching.